I'll never forget the way my boots crunched against the gravel outside Jackson's graduation party. It was April 15th, 2020, and I was 26, carrying a decade of sacrifice on my shoulders just to see my little brother in a cap and gown. The community center buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, and I stepped inside expecting something, maybe a nod, a thanks, anything for the years I'd given up. Instead, I got a chair with a sign taped to it. The failure. That's when I knew I'd been a fool. 10 years earlier, I'd been 17, a junior with oil-stained notebooks and dreams of designing cars that would change the industry. Then my parents' small accounting firm collapsed under allegations of mismanagement, and they lost everything overnight. Bills stacked up like autumn leaves, and Jackson, just 10, needed someone to keep him fed, clothed, and in school. I dropped out, traded textbooks for time cards, and started working at a local garage, waiting tables on weekends. Whatever paid. Mom retreated into migraines and anxiety, Dad into silent resentment, and I became the glue holding us together. Every paycheck went to them, and when Jackson got into law school, I picked up extra shifts to cover his tuition. My dreams of automotive design rusted away in the back of my mind, like an abandoned project car. That night at the party, I wore my best blouse, the one without grease stains, and carried a bottle of champagne as a peace offering. Jackson, 22 now, strutted around in a tailored suit, shaking hands with his fancy new friends. He'd made it to the top of his class with a job lined up at some prestigious firm. I swelled with pride until he waved me over. "Nora got a special seat for you," he said, smirking. He led me outside, past the folding tables to a lone plastic chair by the dumpster. The sign stared up at me in black marker. The failure. His buddies snickered and one clapped him on the back. "Good one, Jackson." My face burned. I stood there, champagne bottle dangling from my hand, while they laughed like I was the punchline to a joke I'd never heard. I'd worked myself raw for this kid. Nights I'd slept in my car to save gas. Days I'd skipped meals so he could have books, and he'd turned me into a clown for his shiny new life. I wanted to smash the bottle, to grab him by that stupid silk tie and ask why, but I just stood there, fist clenched, until the laughter died down and they wandered back inside. I found Mom and Dad by the punch bowl, their faces flushed from cheap wine. "What the hell was that?" I asked, voice low so no one else would hear. Mom giggled, patting my arm. "Oh, Nora, it's just a joke. Don't be so serious." Dad nodded, slurping his drink. "Kid's proud of himself. Let him have his fun." Fun. 10 years of my life for their fun. I turned away, their chuckles chasing me out the door. In my car, I sat with the engine off, staring at the dashboard. The glove box held a check, $1,500, my latest donation to their mortgage payment. I'd been sending them money every month, even after Jackson moved out, because that's what I did, kept them afloat. But that sign, those laughs, they clawed at me. I thought of the girl I'd been, sketching car designs in physics class, dreaming of a studio with my name on it. Where had she gone? Buried under their weight? That's where. The community center's lights spilled across the parking lot, illuminating happy families celebrating achievements I'd made possible. Inside, Jackson was probably accepting congratulations, basking in the glow of his success built on my broken dreams. I remembered the day I'd told my high school counselor I was dropping out. Her face had fallen, eyes filled with disappointment. "Nora, you have such potential. Your designs could take you places." I'd nodded, throat tight, and walked out of her office knowing I was sacrificing my future for theirs. For years, I'd told myself it was worth it. Family comes first, right? I'd watch Jackson study late into the night, his desk lamp the only light in our cramped house, and I'd feel a flicker of pride. At least one of us would make it. But now, sitting in my beat-up Honda with grease permanently embedded under my fingernails, I wondered if I'd been played for a fool all along. Had they ever seen me as anything but their safety net? Their reliable failure? The worst part wasn't the sign or the laughter. It was the realization that they expected it. Of course, Nora would sacrifice everything. Of course, she'd fade into the background while Jackson shined. That was my role, wasn't it? The family martyr. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and scrolled to the automotive design program website I'd bookmarked months ago. Evening classes starting next week. I'd ignored it, told myself I didn't have time, didn't have the money, but I'd had the money. I'd just given it all to them. Not anymore. I clicked enroll, filled out the form, and hit submit before I could second-guess it. Then I grabbed that check from the glove box, tore it in half, and let the pieces flutter to the floor mat. The drive home was quiet, just the hum of tires on asphalt. My apartment waited, a one-room dump with a mattress on the floor and a hot plate, but it was mine. I kicked off my boots, pulled a beer from the fridge, and sat on the edge of the bed. The torn check stared up at me from my pocket, a promise or a dare. I wasn't sure which. All I knew was I'd carried them long enough. Jackson could play his games. Mom and Dad could laugh, but I was done being their mule. Tomorrow I'd start designing cars for me, not them. And I'd be damned if I let anyone call me a failure again. The first week after I tore up that check, I felt like a woman waking up from a long, bad dream. Trade school started Monday, and I walked into that classroom with my head high, sketchbook in hand, ready to learn something for myself. The guy next to me, Leo, a tattooed designer with calloused hands and bright eyes, sized me up and nodded. "You look like you've got ideas already." I smiled. "More than I can count, just never had the chance to use them." He grinned, and that was that. By Friday, I was working part-time at Riley's Auto Design, drafting basic components, feeling alive for the first time in years. My apartment was still a hole, peeling paint, a sink that dripped, a window that wouldn't quite close. But I didn't care. I'd stopped sending Mom and Dad money, and that freed up cash for supplies and tuition. Nights I'd sit at my rickety table sketching engine modifications on proper paper now, not just napkins. Not just repairs, but innovations, sleek aerodynamic enhancements, fuel-efficient systems, stuff I'd dreamed about as a teenager before life buried it. I'd sip tea, pencil moving fast, and think, this is mine. They can't take this. The calls started Tuesday. Mom's voice crackled through my phone, sharp and whiny. "Nora, the mortgage is due. You're not sending anything." I leaned against the wall, staring at a crack in the plaster. "Not this time, Mom. I'm done." She gasped like I'd slapped her. "After all we've been through, you're abandoning us?" I clenched my jaw. "I've been carrying you for 10 years. Figure it out." I hung up before she could cry, but my chest ached. Dad tried next, gruff and accusatory. "Jackson's big shot now, but we're still family. You owe us." "Owe them?" I laughed, bitter, and blocked his number. Jackson stayed quiet, probably too busy posting selfies in his suit on social media. I scrolled past one, him grinning outside his firm, caption, "Living the dream." Good for him. I didn't need his thanks, but I wasn't funding his old life anymore. My phone buzzed nonstop, though. Texts from Mom piling up. "We raised you. How could you?" I muted her too, but the words stuck like grease under my nails. Work at Riley's kept me sane. He was demanding, cursed if I missed a detail, but fair. One day he caught me sketching during lunch. "What's that?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. I showed him a rough draft of a lightweight exhaust system. He squinted, then nodded. "You've got talent, Nora. Don't waste it." That stuck with me. No one had ever called me talented before, not since I quit school. I started bringing my designs to work, refining them while the shop hummed around me. Then Mom showed up. It was a Thursday, 2 weeks after the party, and I was finalizing a component drawing. Riley tapped my shoulder. "Visitor." I looked up, and there she was, hair wild, purse clutched tight. "Nora," she said, voice trembling. "We're behind on everything. Electric's next. You can't do this to us." Co-workers glanced over, and I felt their eyes like pinpricks. I stood, towering over her, and kept my voice low. "I've done enough, Mom. Jackson's got his degree. You've got him. I'm building something now." Her lip quivered. You're selfish. Always were selfish. After a decade of bleeding for them, I pointed to the door. Go home, I've got work. She left, muttering, and Riley clapped my shoulder. Family's complicated sometimes. Keep your head up, Nora. I nodded, turned back to my drafting table, and pressed my pencil harder than necessary. That night, I sketched until my hand cramped. A sharp, aggressive design, all angles and power. It felt good, like I was carving myself out of their shadow. The calls stopped after that, but the silence was loud. I checked my phone, half expecting Jackson to chime in, but nothing. Maybe he didn't notice the money drying up. His firm probably paid him plenty. I didn't care. I had Riley, the shop, and a stack of designs growing taller each day. One evening, I finished a concept, a sleek, efficient engine cooling system, and pinned it to my wall. It stared back at me, proof I wasn't the woman on that chair. Not anymore. But late at night, lying on my lumpy mattress, I'd hear Mom's voice, selfish, and wonder if I'd gone too far. They'd raised me, sure, but I'd raised them too, hadn't I? I pushed it down, focused on the drip of the sink, the pencil callus on my finger. This was my shot, and I wasn't turning back. Not yet. By mid-May, I had settled into a rhythm. Classes, shop, sketches. Trade school was tough, but I excelled at the technical drawings, creating components like I'd been born to it. Riley started trusting me with client projects, letting me draft custom parts, and I'd come home with graphite-smudged hands and a grin. My designs weren't just doodles anymore. They were turning into something real. One night, I completed a prototype drawing, a lightweight intake manifold I'd designed from scratch. It wasn't perfect, but the calculations worked, promising smooth performance on paper. Riley saw it and raised an eyebrow. That's professional level, Nora. You're wasting time not showing this off. I shrugged, but his words lit a fire in me. Meanwhile, Jackson's world started cracking. I'd unmuted Mom's texts, mostly out of habit, and one popped up late on a Wednesday. Jackson's in trouble. Firm's a mess. I scrolled his social media, expecting more suit pics, but found a news link instead. His law firm had tanked. Some senior partner embezzled funds, dragged the whole place down. Jackson was out, jobless. His shiny degree useless overnight. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to laugh. Mr. Perfect brought low. But another part, the part that had helped him with homework at 10, felt a pain I couldn't shake. Mom's next text hit harder. We're behind on the mortgage. Jackson can't help. I pictured the house, sagging porch, chipped paint, where I'd grown up fixing leaks while Dad complained. They'd leaned on me so long they didn't know how to stand without me. I typed back, "Not my problem," and tossed the phone on the bed. But it buzzed again. Dad this time, his voice rough over voicemail. "Nora, we're losing the place. Come home. We need you." I deleted it, but his tone, cracked, desperate, stayed with me. I stared at my designs pinned to the wall, my future taking shape in clean lines and careful measurements, and wondered how long I could keep pretending they didn't matter. Summer turned the shop into an oven, but I didn't mind the heat. By July, I'd been at Riley's for 3 months, and the place felt more like home than anywhere else. My hands were permanently stained with graphite and engine grease, my mind constantly churning with designs and improvements. I'd found my rhythm. Wake up, sketch, work, class, sketch more. No more late-night calls asking where the rent money was. No more guilt trips. Just me and the future I was building. Riley noticed. One afternoon, as I finished detailing a custom intake system, he leaned against my drafting table. "Hank's coming by tomorrow," he said, eyes on my design. "The guy from Velocity Motors." My pencil froze mid-stroke. Hank Reeves was a legend in automotive design circles, known for giving talented unknowns their first break. "He's looking for fresh ideas," Riley continued. "Show him your portfolio." I nodded, throat suddenly dry. That night, I stayed late organizing my best work, the cooling system, the lightweight manifold, the aerodynamic body modifications. When I finally crawled into bed at 2 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Mom. "Jackson's moving back home. We need help with his student loans." I turned the phone face down without replying. Tomorrow was about me, not them. Hank was shorter than I expected, with calloused hands and keen eyes that missed nothing. He flipped through my portfolio slowly, nodding occasionally. "You've got something here," he said finally. "Raw, but promising. You need refinement, but the instincts are solid." He offered me a part-time position at his design shop while I finished trade school. More money, more responsibility, and a chance to see my designs actually built. I accepted on the spot. That night, I celebrated alone in my apartment with a bottle of cheap wine and takeout. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Mom, Dad, even Jackson now, but I silenced it. This moment was mine. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. Mom stood in the hallway, hair disheveled, eyes red. "You're ignoring us," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. She glanced around, taking in my sketches pinned to the walls, the textbooks on the table. "Playing student while we're drowning." I crossed my arms. "I am a student, and I just got a job with Hank Reeves." She blinked, the name clearly meaning nothing to her. "Jackson's loans are coming due. The bank called about the house again." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, the words easier to say each time. "We're your family." Her voice cracked. "After everything we've done." "Everything you've done?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. "I dropped out of school to support you. I worked 3 jobs so Jackson could become a lawyer. And what did I get? A chair labeled failure and a decade of being your ATM." She flinched. "That chair was just a joke." "It wasn't funny." I moved to the door, holding it open. "I've got class in an hour." "You're just going to abandon us?" Her eyes welled up. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm living my life. You should try it sometime." After she left, I leaned against the closed door, heart hammering. It hurt to push her away, but it would hurt more to get pulled back into their quicksand. Working for Hank changed everything. His shop was sleek and modern, filled with designers who spoke my language. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who saw potential in me, not just what I could give them. My first paycheck was more than I'd ever made in a month, and I spent it on proper drafting equipment and a better apartment, one with windows that actually closed and a sink that didn't leak. Dad showed up at Hank's shop in August, looking older than I remembered, hat in his hands. "Jackson's firm collapsed completely," he said, voice low. "He's got no references, no prospects. The loans are crushing him." I kept working on my design, not looking up. "He's got a law degree. He'll figure it out." "He's your brother, Nora." "I know exactly who he is." I finally met his eyes. The one who put a failure sign on my chair while wearing the suit I paid for. Dad's shoulders slumped. He was just showing off for his friends. At my expense, after I gave up everything for him. I turned back to my work. "I've got a deadline." He hesitated, then placed a folded paper on my desk. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. If you could just help this once—" I pushed the paper back without opening it. "No." "You're really going to let us lose the house?" His voice hardened. "I'm really going to let you handle your own problems for once." After he left, Hank appeared at my station. "Family trouble?" I nodded, embarrassed. "Sorry about that." "No need to apologize." He studied my design. "This is good work. Keep focused on this, not them." By September, I'd completed my first major project for Hank, a redesigned exhaust system that improved fuel efficiency by 12%. When the prototype performed exactly as I'd predicted, Hank clapped me on the back. "You've got a future here, Nora. Real talent." That night, I treated myself to dinner at a nice restaurant, something I'd never done before. Sitting alone with a glass of wine, I scrolled through my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, a text from Jackson. Can we talk? I put the phone away and enjoyed my meal in peace. October brought crisp air and a promotion at Hank's. I was now lead designer on a small project, creating custom components for a specialty racing team. My name would be on the designs, official recognition of my work. The same day I got the news, Jackson appeared at my new apartment. He looked thinner, the expensive suit replaced by worn jeans and a faded sweatshirt. "Nice place," he said, glancing around. "Better than that dump you used to have." "What do you want, Jackson?" I leaned against the doorframe, not inviting him in. "Mom and Dad said you won't help anymore." He shifted uncomfortably. "Things are tough right now." "Things have always been tough for me," I replied. "You never seem to notice." He had the decency to look ashamed. "Look, about that chair at graduation. Save it." I cut him off. "I'm not interested in apologies that only come when you need money." "We're about to lose the house, Nora." "Then lose it." The words came out cold, but I didn't take them back. "You've got a law degree. Figure something out." As he walked away, shoulders hunched, I felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, not quite satisfaction. Just certainty that I was finally on the right path, even if I was walking it alone. That night, I worked late on my racing components, losing myself in the clean lines and precise measurements. My phone buzzed with a text from Hank. "Big trade show next month. Want to showcase your exhaust system?" I smiled, typing back an immediate yes. My future was taking shape, one design at a time, and for once, I wasn't carrying anyone but myself. The Detroit Auto Innovation Expo sprawled across the convention center like a mechanical wonderland. Sleek prototypes gleamed under spotlights, and industry heavyweights mingled with up-and-comers. I stood beside my display, a cutaway model of my exhaust system mounted on a rotating platform, trying not to fidget with my blazer. It was new, tailored, bought with my own money. A far cry from the oil-stained clothes I'd worn for years. "You ready?" Hank appeared at my elbow, clipboard in hand. I nodded, throat dry. "As I'll ever be." "Remember, these people aren't just looking at your design, they're looking at you." He tapped the prototype. "Show them the woman who created this." The morning passed in a blur of handshakes and technical questions. I explained pressure differentials and material choices to curious engineers, my confidence growing with each conversation. By noon, 3 companies had left business cards asking for follow-up meetings. I was explaining my design to a representative from Toyota when I spotted them, Mom, Dad, and Jackson, standing awkwardly at the edge of the crowd. Mom clutched her purse like a life preserver. Dad's eyes darted around the glossy displays. Jackson stared directly at me, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me," I said to the Toyota rep, handing him my card. "I'll be right back." I crossed the floor, heart hammering. "What are you doing here?" Mom stepped forward, attempting a smile. "We saw the article in the paper about local designers at the expo. Your picture was there." I'd forgotten about that interview. The Detroit Free Press had run a feature on emerging talent, with a photo of me beside my prototype. "How did you even get in? These are industry passes." Jackson held up a badge. "I know someone who works security." Of course he did. Jackson always knew someone. "Well, you've seen it. Now you can go." I turned to leave, but Dad caught my arm. "Nora, wait. We came to talk." "I'm working." I pulled away. "I have potential clients." 5 minutes," Mom pleaded. "Please." I glanced back at my booth, where the Toyota rep was examining the model. "Fine. 5 minutes." I led them to a quiet corner near the service hallway, arms crossed defensively. "We lost the house," Dad said without preamble. "Bank took it last week." I kept my face neutral. "I know, I drove by." The foreclosure sign had been stark against the peeling paint of my childhood home. I'd sat in my car for 20 minutes, feeling nothing and everything at once. "We're staying in a motel," Mom continued. "Jackson's been applying everywhere, but with the firm scandal." "What do you want from me?" I cut in. "Money? A place to stay? Because I've given enough." Jackson stepped forward. We didn't come for handouts. Really? That would be a first. His jaw tightened. I deserve that. But we're here because... He glanced at our parents. Because I told them we needed to see what you've built, to understand. I blinked, caught off guard. Show us, Dad said quietly. Show us what was worth abandoning your family for. The words stung, but I led them back to my display where the Toyota rep had moved on. I stood beside my prototype, suddenly seeing it through their eyes. The complex geometry, the precision engineering, the months of work distilled into metal and carbon fiber. This is an exhaust system I designed, I began, falling into my presentation rhythm. It reduces back pressure while maintaining optimal flow characteristics, improving both performance and efficiency. Their blank faces told me they understood none of it. It makes cars run better, I simplified. Uses less fuel, lasts longer. And people pay for this? Dad asked, genuinely curious. 3 companies want meetings today. If any of them license the design... I hesitated. It could mean 6 figures. Mom's eyes widened. Jackson whistled low. This is just the beginning, I continued, warming to my subject. I've got a dozen more designs in development. Hank's talking about making me a partner if things keep going well. You did all this in what, 6 months? Jackson asked, examining the prototype. I did this because you left me no choice, I replied, voice hardening. Because I was tired of being the family ATM while you called me a failure. He flinched. About that chair. It wasn't just the chair. My voice rose, drawing glances from nearby booths. I lowered it with effort. It was 10 years of taking everything I had to give and still looking down on me. 10 years of sacrificing my dreams so you could have yours. We didn't force you to drop out, Dad protested. Didn't you? Who else was going to keep the lights on? Who else was going to make sure Jackson had textbooks and college applications and decent clothes for interviews? My hands shook. I was 17. You were the parents. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We were drowning, Nora. The firm collapse, the debts, and you threw me in to save yourselves. The truth of it hit me anew. You watched me drown for a decade and called it family loyalty. Jackson stepped closer, his voice low. I didn't know, Nora. I knew you worked, but I didn't know you gave up college for me. They never told me. I stared at him, then at our parents. Is that true? Mom looked away. Dad studied his shoes. Jesus, I breathed. You let him think everything was fine? That his tuition just appeared by magic? We didn't want him to worry, Mom whispered. You mean you didn't want him to feel guilty? I corrected. So you made me the silent sacrifice instead. Jackson's face had gone pale. All those extra shifts you worked? The nights you came home at 2 a.m.? Paying your way, I finished, while you planned parties with that sign. He swallowed hard. I was showing off, being cruel to look big. I didn't understand what you'd given up. Would it have mattered if you did? His silence was answer enough. Look, I sighed, suddenly exhausted. I have to get back to work. Real work, with people who value what I can create, not just what I can provide. Nora, please. Mom reached for my hand. We're still family. I stepped back. Family doesn't use each other like ATMs. Family doesn't mock each other's sacrifices. We can do better, Dad said. We can try. I'm sure you can, but I'm done carrying you. I gestured to my prototype. I'm building something here. Something that's just mine. Jackson nodded slowly. I see that now. He hesitated, then extended his hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Really sorry. I looked at his hand, remembering the boy who used to follow me around the garage, asking endless questions while I changed oil filters, before the weight of their expectations crushed us both. Sorry doesn't fix 10 years, I said, not taking his hand. But it's a start. I saw Hank waving from across the floor, another potential client in tow. "I have to go," I told them. "My future's waiting." As I walked away, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, that would take more time, but free. The weight I'd carried for so long was finally where it belonged, behind me.